I spent so many years trying to make everything perfect. The spotless house, the tightly organized schedule, the version of myself that always had it together. Maybe you've lived that way too. In our modern world, perfection feels like a quiet rule we're all expected to follow. But the harder I tried, the more exhausted I became. Nothing ever stayed perfect for long, and every flaw felt like a small failure. Then one day, I stumbled across an old Japanese idea called Wabi Sabi, a way of seeing beauty not in perfection, but in the cracks, the wear, the gentle signs of life. And something in me softened. I thought about the worn wooden table in my kitchen, the faded mug I reach for every morning, the wrinkles forming at the corner of my eyes. Maybe these things weren't flaws. Maybe they were stories. The more I learned, the more I realized how deeply comforting this philosophy is. Wabi Sabi reminds us that life isn't meant to be polished, it's meant to be lived. The imperfect moments, the messy room, the half-finished plans, the days when we're not our strongest, those are the moments that make us human. And when we stop chasing perfection, we finally make space for peace, for acceptance, for a gentler way of being with ourselves.
There's a certain comfort we feel when everything looks polished, the house spotless, the schedule organized, the future carefully planned. For most of my life, I believed that was the goal: order, control, perfection. If I could just get everything right, maybe then I'd finally feel calm. Maybe then I'd finally feel enough. But life, as it quietly reminded me again and again, has its own way of softening the edges of our plans. And eventually, I stumbled upon an idea that changed the way I saw everything, an old Japanese way of seeing the world called Wabi Sabi. Wabi Sabi isn't a design trend, though people sometimes treat it like one, and it isn't a luxury lifestyle or a curated aesthetic. It's a way of noticing the world, a way of accepting life as it truly is, without the filters, without the pressure, without the endless chase for something shinier, newer, or more impressive. At its heart, Wabi Sabi teaches 3 simple truths. Nothing is permanent, nothing is perfect, and nothing is ever truly complete. At first, those words felt unsettling. We spend so much of our lives fighting those truths. We try to make things last forever. We try to make ourselves better, smoother, more flawless. We try to finish everything on our list, tie up every loose end, hold everything together. But the older I've gotten, the more I realize life doesn't work that way, and maybe it's not supposed to. I learned this on a quiet afternoon that I didn't expect to remember. I was cleaning out the attic, sorting through boxes that had followed me through decades without much attention. Inside one box was an old wooden bowl, scratched, worn, no longer smooth to the touch. It belonged to my grandmother, who used it nearly every day. I held it in my hands and noticed the uneven grain, the faded color, the tiny crack on the side. And yet, it felt more beautiful than anything new I could buy. Not because it was flawless, but because it wasn't. Because it carried time, use, history, and love. Because it had lived. That's when Wabi Sabi clicked for me. Beauty isn't in perfection, it's in presence. It's in seeing things and people and moments exactly as they are, without demanding that they be something else. For so many years, I chased the idea of a perfect life, the perfect home, the perfect plan, the perfect version of myself. I thought peace would come once I polished all the rough edges. But peace didn't come from perfection, it came when I stopped fighting imperfection. Wabi Sabi teaches us to appreciate what is here now, even if it's cracked, aging, or incomplete. It asks us to look at the chipped mug that's been with us for 20 years, the wrinkles forming around our eyes, the relationships that have weathered storms but still stand. the dreams that didn't unfold the way we imagined, and to see that all of it has value. There's a soft, quiet beauty in things that show their age, in mornings that don't go as planned, in a home that looks lived in a life that didn't follow the straight line you once mapped out. And maybe, most importantly, Wabi Sabi invites us to extend that same understanding to ourselves. Because if nothing is perfect, then we don't have to be either. If nothing lasts forever, then every moment matters more. If nothing is ever complete, then we can stop waiting for someday and live today. These days, I find peace in the small imperfections, the way the sunlight hits the scratched table, the way the garden grows unevenly, the way dinner doesn't always turn out the same. I find comfort in knowing that everything is in motion, everything is changing, everything is alive. There's a gentle surrender in accepting life this way, a softening, a return. Maybe you felt the pressure too, the need to hold everything together, to keep up, to push forward even when your heart is tired. But Wabi Sabi reminds us that life is not a performance, it's a collection of moments, fleeting, fragile, precious, meant to be lived, not perfected. So today, maybe let the dishes stay in the sink a little longer. Maybe sit with your coffee while the morning light shifts across the room. Maybe hold something old in your hands and let it remind you that time passing is not the enemy, it's the story. And maybe, just maybe, allow yourself to breathe into the truth that you are enough, even as you change, even as you age, even as you grow. Wabi Sabi isn't about fixing your life, it's about seeing your life gently, honestly, completely, and finding beauty in every imperfect corner of it. That is where peace begins, not in perfection, but in acceptance.
I once heard a story about an elderly Japanese woman who kept a chipped teacup on a small wooden shelf in her home. The cup wasn't special in the way we usually define special. It wasn't new, expensive, or beautifully crafted. In fact, it was imperfect. A corner was cracked, the glaze had faded, and the rim had a tiny dent that only grew more noticeable with time. Anyone else might have thrown it away without a second thought, but she kept it. She cared for it, and she used it every single morning. When someone asked her why she didn't replace it, she smiled gently and said, "This cup stayed with me through the loneliest days of my life. When I look at it, I remember that I don't have to be perfect to be enough, and that thought brings me peace." That simple sentence stayed with me for years. It was the first time I truly understood the meaning of Wabi Sabi, the quiet beauty and imperfection, in aging, in the ordinary. A kind of peace that doesn't come from fixing, chasing, or polishing, but from accepting life as it is, and ourselves as we are. And maybe, in a world like ours, fast, loud, endlessly demanding, that kind of peace is exactly what we're missing. I think about that chipped teacup whenever life feels too heavy, too complicated, too rushed. We spend so much time trying to keep everything shiny and flawless. Our homes, our plans, our bodies, our schedules. We push ourselves to perform, to achieve, to stay on top of things, even when we're exhausted, especially when we're exhausted. It's almost as if somewhere along the way, we were taught that being human isn't enough, that we have to be more, do more, keep up with more. And yet, when I talk to people, especially those in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, I hear something different, a longing not for perfection, but for meaning, not for speed, but for stillness, not for more things, but for a deeper sense of home within themselves. Maybe you felt that too. There comes a moment in life when we start to see the beauty in the things we once rushed past, wrinkles that tell stories, objects that carry memories, mornings that are slow and unhurried. The chipped teacup, the old wooden chair, the faded photograph tucked behind a mirror, these things remind us that beauty doesn't fade when time touches it, it simply changes shape. One autumn morning, I found myself sitting alone at the kitchen table, sunlight gently spilling across a stack of dishes waiting to be washed.
Nothing was perfect that day. The house was a little cluttered. I hadn't slept well. My thoughts were scattered. But as I sat there holding my warm mug, not chipped like the woman's, but old enough to feel familiar, something softened in me. I realized that the peace I was searching for wasn't out there in some perfect version of my life. It was right here, in the quiet, imperfect moment I was already living. And maybe that's what Wabi Sabi really is. A gentle reminder that nothing needs to be flawless to be meaningful, that aging is not a flaw, it's a story, that loss and change don't steal beauty, they create a different kind, that the cracks in our lives, and in us, are not failures, but openings where light can get in. I think many of us in today's rushing world need that reminder. We live in a culture obsessed with youth, speed, productivity, and perfection, but the truth, the deep, honest truth, is that the soul doesn't thrive in perfection, it thrives in authenticity. It thrives in presence. It thrives in the small, imperfect moments that make up a life. Like sitting on the porch wrapped in an old sweater, like the sound of rain tapping softly on the window, like a hand-worn book with folded corners, like laughter at the dinner table over something silly and unplanned. These are not perfect moments, but they are real, and that is where peace lives. The Japanese woman kept her chipped teacup because it reminded her that being imperfect didn't make her broken, it made her human. And maybe that's a lesson worth holding on to, especially for those of us who feel the weight of years lived, mistakes made, and roads traveled. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to be flawless. You don't have to keep every piece of your life polished and shining. You only have to be here, present, honest, and open to the quiet beauty already around you. Wabi Sabi teaches us that life doesn't have to be perfect to be good. Things don't have to last forever to matter, and we don't have to be unscarred to be worthy of love, peace, and belonging. So today, maybe take a moment, just one small moment, to breathe, to notice, to let yourself be human. Hold the chipped cup of your life gently in your hands, and remember, there is beauty in every crack, there is peace in every ordinary day, and there is meaning in every imperfect, tender step you take.
As we grow older, something subtle begins to shift. We start noticing how quickly the mornings turn into evenings, how the years no longer stretch endlessly ahead the way they once did. Time moves differently. The body feels different too, a little stiffer when we wake, a little slower when we rise, a little more fragile in ways we never paid attention to before. And the world around us seems to change even faster. Technology, routines, people, even the places we once knew by heart. There comes a moment when all of this can feel overwhelming, almost like we're being carried down a river that's moving just a bit too fast. But there's also a quiet truth many of us discover with age. Within all these changes, there is a different kind of beauty, one we couldn't fully appreciate when we were younger. And that's where the spirit of Wabi Sabi comes in, a gentle Japanese philosophy that teaches us to embrace impermanence, simplicity, and the imperfect nature of life. I first encountered Wabi Sabi not through a book or a class, but through a moment I didn't expect. One autumn afternoon, I was cleaning the kitchen, feeling frustrated about how quickly everything seemed to wear out. The small crack along my favorite mug, the fading color of the old wooden table, the creases deepening on my own hands. Everything felt like a reminder that nothing stays new, that nothing stays the same. I sighed, set the cracked mug on the counter, and paused for a moment. The late afternoon sunlight was streaming through the window, falling right onto that imperfect mug. Something about the scene softened me. The crack didn't look like damage anymore. It looked like history, a sign of all the mornings I'd held it, all the warm cups of tea I'd shared with people I loved. Suddenly, the imperfection didn't bother me.
It comforted me. That's Wabi Sabi, the quiet invitation to see beauty not in perfection, but in the natural, worn, aging truth of things. As we get older, this idea becomes more than just a philosophy. It becomes a way to breathe again. Instead of fighting the changes in our bodies, we begin to honor them. Each wrinkle, each scar, each softening edge tells a story of where we've been, what we've overcome, and how deeply we've lived. There is a tenderness in accepting that we are not meant to stay the same. The same is true for the people around us. Children grow up, friends move away, relationships shift, loved ones leave us sooner than we expect. Life rearranges itself again and again. But Wabi Sabi teaches us that love doesn't disappear just because circumstances change. It transforms, sometimes becoming quieter, sometimes taking new shapes, sometimes living only in memory. And even that, too, can be beautiful. I've found that this perspective brings a deep sense of peace, a peace rooted not in controlling life, but in letting it be what it is. Instead of clinging to how things used to be, we learn to appreciate what's here right now. The warmth of a simple meal, the softness of an evening breeze, the comfort of sitting with someone who knows us well. There's also a freedom in letting go of the pressure to be perfect. When we were younger, many of us spent years trying to meet expectations, to achieve, to keep up, to present a polished version of ourselves to the world. But with time, that weight begins to loosen. Wabi Sabi reminds us that real beauty lives in honesty, in authenticity, in the gentle acceptance of our flaws. We don't need to hide the parts of ourselves that have been weathered by life. Those parts are often the most beautiful. And perhaps the greatest lesson Wabi Sabi offers is this: peace is not found in trying to stop change. Peace is found in learning to move with it. When we sit with that truth, life becomes less heavy. We stop rushing to preserve what's fading and begin savoring what's unfolding. We notice the charm in old books, the grace in aging faces, the strength in a body that has carried us through decades. We learn to find meaning not in wanting everything to last forever, but in appreciating the preciousness of each moment precisely because it won't. As time moves forward, as it always will, we can choose to meet it with softness instead of fear. We can choose to honor the past, cherish the present, and welcome the future with open hands. And perhaps in learning to accept the cracks, the wrinkles, the changes, the goodbyes, and even the uncertainty, we discover something quietly extraordinary. Peace doesn't come from resisting life. It comes from embracing it. Imperfect, transient, beautifully unfinished, just as it is.
There's a quiet moment each morning, just before the world fully wakes, when the house is still, the light is soft, and life feels a little more honest. I didn't always notice it. For years, I rushed right past it, busy chasing plans, responsibilities, and the version of life I thought I needed to have. But the older I get, the more I realize that peace isn't found in the loud, spectacular moments. It's found in the simple ones, the ones we overlook, the ones that don't try to impress us. And somewhere along this journey, I learned to accept something I had resisted for most of my life: imperfection. Accept imperfection. Embrace the imperfect rhythm of life. There was a time when I wanted everything in my home and in my life to look just right. The cushions had to be perfect, the kitchen spotless, the schedule organized down to the minute. But one afternoon, I stood in the middle of my living room and saw the truth. The things that made my home feel alive weren't the flawless surfaces. It was the blanket casually thrown over the couch after a long day, the old mug with a tiny crack that still held my favorite morning coffee, The family photos, slightly tilted, but full of memories. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and it was enough. So I whispered to myself, you don't need perfection, you just need peace. Peace, I've learned, begins the moment we stop chasing impossible standards and simply allow ourselves to be human, messy, flawed, beautifully real. Slow down, the gentle wisdom of moving slower. There's a Japanese word, Wabi Sabi, the beauty of simplicity, of quiet moments, of things imperfect yet full of soul. I think of it every time I sit with a warm cup of tea in the early morning. No rushing, no multitasking, just being. I used to believe slowing down was a luxury, something I could do later, once life was settled. But later rarely comes, and if it does, it comes at a cost. Burnout, exhaustion, the feeling of being alive but not truly living. Now I try to slow down in small ways, watching the sunlight stretch across the kitchen floor, listening to the birds outside instead of checking my phone first thing, taking the longer route home because the trees look prettier that way. These aren't grand gestures, but they shift something inside me. In slowing down, I find myself again. Declutter your life, letting go so you can receive more. I once opened a closet expecting to feel organized. Instead, all I felt was overwhelmed. Rows of things I didn't use, clothes I saved just in case, items I bought to fill emotional gaps rather than actual needs. So I began letting things go gently, one by one, not to create a perfect minimalist home, but to create space for breath, clarity, and meaning. As I sorted through drawers and shelves, I found treasures I had forgotten. A recipe card handwritten by my grandmother, a faded postcard from a friend who moved away, a little wooden box carved by my father's hands. These weren't just objects, they were pieces of my story. I kept those, and I let go of the rest. I realized something profound. When we declutter our homes, we also declutter our minds. And in that newfound space, peace has room to settle. Appreciate age. Every wrinkle is a chapter, not a flaw. I used to notice the wrinkles forming around my eyes, the silver strands quietly appearing in my hair. But then I realized these weren't signs of fading, they were signs of living. Every wrinkle carried a memory, laughter shared, tears shed, moments endured. Every gray hair represented wisdom earned the hard way. Age isn't something to hide, it's something to honor. It means we've walked through storms and sunshine, and here we are, still standing, softer in some ways, stronger in others. There's a beauty in aging that youth will never understand, the beauty of knowing what truly matters. Beauty in the everyday, the quiet magic we often ignore. Some days, beauty arrives quietly, like the golden glow of late afternoon light warming the dining table, the sound of leaves rustling in the backyard, the scent of fresh rain drifting through an open window. These moments don't shout for our attention, they whisper. And when we pause long enough to notice them, they remind us, happiness isn't somewhere else, it's right here, in the simplest things. I used to think life's meaning hid in accomplishments, milestones, grand events. But now I see it clearly. Meaning hides in the everyday, in the ordinary minutes we often overlook. A gentle truth to carry with you. As the years pass, I'm learning to live lighter, softer, slower. Not because life has become easier, but because I finally understand what's worth holding on to. A peaceful life isn't built from perfection, speed, or accumulation. It's built from presence, from gratitude, from noticing the quiet blessings that have always been there. So today, maybe take a moment just for yourself. Sit by the window, hold a warm cup, let the world move without you for a little while. And remember, you don't need more to live fully. You just need to be here, exactly where your feet are.
Take a moment and look around the room you're in right now.
Don't rush. Don't judge. Just notice. Maybe there's an old object sitting quietly on a shelf, a mug with a tiny crack, a chair that's seen better days, or a faded photograph tucked inside a simple frame. Choose just one. Let your eyes rest on it and ask yourself, why is this beautiful to me, even though it's not perfect? For me, it was an old wooden chair in the corner of my living room. Nothing fancy, a bit worn around the edges, the finish softened from years of use. I bought it decades ago when money was tight, and although I've replaced many things since then, that chair stayed. One evening, as I sat alone after a long day, I realized why. It wasn't beautiful because it was flawless. It was beautiful because it held stories, quiet ones, the kind life whispers over the years. It carried the memory of late-night conversations, mornings with sunlight warming the seat, moments of laughter, moments of loss, moments when life felt heavy and I needed a place to rest. We spend so much of our lives chasing after things that are new, polished, impressive, but as we grow older, especially in our 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond, we begin to understand that beauty has very little to do with perfection. True beauty is often found in the things that have lived with us, the things that have stayed. Maybe you chose a photograph. At first glance, it might not look remarkable. The colors could be faded, the edges worn. But when you look closely, it holds a story, someone you've loved, a moment you long to remember, a younger version of yourself who had no idea how much life was still ahead. That photograph is a reminder that love, time, and memory are the real artists shaping our world. Or maybe you picked a small, ordinary teacup, one you reach for without thinking. Its surface might be scratched, the glaze uneven, but when you hold it, there's warmth, there's comfort, there's the soft routine of morning light, the first sip of the day, the peace of being fully present for just a few quiet minutes. In a world obsessed with upgrading, replacing, and discarding, we forget how to appreciate the quiet value in what's already here. We forget that imperfection is what makes something feel alive. And maybe, just maybe, this is also true for us. We look at ourselves and see the changes time has made, wrinkles, scars, slower steps, softer edges. And sometimes we think those changes make us less strong, less capable, less beautiful. But what if the opposite is true? What if the lines on our faces, the stories in our eyes, and the lessons etched into our hearts are the very things that make our lives meaningful? Just like that old object in your room, you are beautiful because you've lived, because you've endured, because you've carried moments, joyful ones, painful ones, ordinary ones, that shaped who you are. There's a quiet comfort that comes with age, the understanding that perfection was never the goal. The goal was always connection, presence, grace, and the courage to keep moving forward even when life felt heavy. In my younger years, I chased flawless things, the perfect home, the perfect plan, the perfect version of myself. But now, when life feels overwhelming or loud, I find peace in the simple, imperfect details of the everyday. A chipped mount, a worn chair, a photograph that once made me smile. These things slow me down. They remind me that meaning doesn't live in perfection, it lives in presence. So today, I want to invite you to do something small but powerful. Look again at the object you chose. See it not as something old or flawed, but as something alive with memory. Something that reminds you to soften your expectations, to slow down, and to appreciate the quiet beauty of what's already in your life. Because sometimes peace isn't found by changing everything. Sometimes peace is found by seeing, truly seeing, what's been right in front of you all along.
And if you let yourself sit with this moment a little longer, you might notice something else. The room feels calmer, your breath deeper, your heart a little lighter. That's the gift hidden in simplicity. That's the gift found in choosing presence. And that's the gift of realizing that beauty, real beauty, does not require perfection. It only requires attention. In a world that constantly pushes us toward perfection, it's easy to feel like we're always falling behind. The spotless home, the flawless routine, the perfectly planned future. Somewhere along the way, these expectations became the measure of a good life. And yet, the more we chase perfection, the more exhausted we become. I remember a day when I dropped a favorite ceramic mug. It cracked right down the middle. Normally, I would have thrown it out, frustrated at myself for being careless. But something made me stop. I held it in my hands and realized, even in its brokenness, it was still beautiful, still useful, still mine. That moment reminded me of Wabi Sabi, the Japanese philosophy that celebrates imperfection, simplicity, and the quiet beauty of things that have lived a little. Wabi Sabi teaches us that peace doesn't come from flawless lives. It comes from accepting life as it is. The chipped edges, the wrinkled skin, the unfinished stories. These aren't flaws, they're proof that we've lived, loved, and kept going. As I've grown older, I've found comfort in that understanding. I no longer rush to fix every blemish or smooth out every wrinkle in my days. Instead, I try to notice the beauty in small, ordinary moments. The warmth of morning light on the kitchen counter, the sound of the neighbor's dog, the softness of a worn-in sweater. These simple things have a quiet magic, the kind we only feel when we stop expecting everything to be perfect. And maybe that's where real happiness begins. Not in having a life that looks perfect from the outside, but in embracing a life that feels honest on the inside. When we allow ourselves and everything around us to be imperfect, we make room for peace. We make room for gratitude. We make room for joy. If you're tired of the pressure, the noise, the endless striving, maybe Wabi Sabi is the reminder you need today that beauty lives in simplicity and peace grows wherever acceptance is planted. If you'd like to explore more gentle philosophies that make life lighter and more meaningful, subscribe to the channel and tap the little bell icon. Thank you for spending this quiet moment with me today.